Hey, good Monday morning, and thanks for logging on here to BAMWX.com or maybe our YouTube channel or the Weather Porthole application. Wherever you're seeing the video, Michael Clark here with BAMWX. I want to take a second to kind of go over everything we've seen happen here over the course of the last, really couple of weeks. We've just seen over and over again just all these cold weather model forecasts and all the snow that's supposed to be coming and the negative NAO that's supposed to produce this just epic cold and snow pattern. And I kind of want to just touch on why that hasn't really happened. All right, so I want to get down into the analysis today. We'll kind of take a look here first at our intro slide. And this is, the slide we include at the beginning of our reports on a daily basis for our customers. But today the featured images are certainly the multiple failed and just really horrendous attempts at the weather models predicting above normal national heating demand for the country. It's done it multiple times this month. Right now, to start off here, if we look at December and January as it looks to finish, around 1,674 HDDs. Since 1953, it would be the 7th warmest two-month period in winter of all time. Pretty remarkable. Right now, if we continue our February forecast, we add it all together, we would look to finish around the 8th warmest winter of all time, possibly 6th or 7th, depending on the February forecast. All right, so certainly something to consider. When you look at the temperature departures since the start of meteorological winter, you can see a large majority of the country warm, with the exception of some here down across the south, the deep south, and the south and east that have been cooler. But this is going to change. In fact, the pattern really is going to change in terms of where the warmth is associated. But we're going to put the warmth now in some of the key coastal regions of the area that look for cold, especially in the natural gas world. All right, so regardless, it's been very warm overall for the country. Precipitation-wise, it's also been relatively dry. I mean, when we look at the precipitation from normal, especially across the primary growing regions of the U.S., the winter precip hasn't been all that impressive. It's been around normal here in the heart of the Corn Belt, if you will. But many places here are actually running below the average, and it's actually been quite dry in some spots here across the central U.S., especially the desert south and west. Wetter up and down the east coast here, winter to date. All right, looking at snowfall just in the short term, over the course of the next 24 hours, a little clipper system is going to come through, possibly bringing some snow down through Iowa, northern Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. Some winter weather advisors have been hoisted here. But some of the latest model data has kind of dried this up some. It's actually warmed up some, and it's actually decreasing some of the snow threat here in the Ohio Valley. We'll have to see how that forecast pans out, but this is just a look at 24-hour snowfall. Some heavier snow expected down here to the south and west. Now, 7-day precipitation numbers continue the drier theme for most of the country. There's not really any big systems to note unless you're down here in the Arklatex regions, down into the Gulf coastal states, where some impressive rains may be possible. 1 to 2 inches, locally higher amounts. Both the GFS and the European agree with that in terms of just rainfall or liquid here over the next 7 days. All right. Looking at snowfall the next 7 days, a lot of the liquid forecast will be in the form of snow across the north central plains, where generally over the next 7 days you could probably be expecting a 3 to 5 inch snow across the northern tier, and then some inner northeast, inland of the northeast, the inner northeast regions up here, possibly looking at some snow, lake effect, and so on and so forth from that. But not any big systems to note across the central U.S., the south, or up under the coastal regions of the U.S. here going forward. So let's talk about what has been going on with the modeling and why is it getting cold, getting so cold, and then kind of failing. And this is our theory, at least. For a long time here last week, the models were handling the MJO forecast very, very poorly. They were kind of getting stuck in phase 3 and then taking the MJO into the circle. So what they were doing is they were under supposedly, under the impression that the MJO would just be stuck here, and then it would kind of go into the circle and die out. And the model was kind of having this lingering effect, if you will, on keeping the MJO in this colder phase. When in reality, we look at the progression of how it's just actually behaved, the observations. We look here from the evening of the 10th of January now to the evening of the 17th of January, and we can see where the convection was located over the eastern Indian Ocean and how it's migrated from essentially about 90 east to now it's migrated to just east of about 120. All right, so it's certainly migrating, and it's arguable it's phases 4 and 5. Well, I'll tell you one thing with the European ensembles, they have a horrible time with MJO convection in the maritime continent. It's a horrible bias in the European weather model. It does a terrible job with trying to take convection through the maritime continent, so it tries to avoid it. So you can see here, even the latest European, it's actually now initializing in phase 4, which is why we believe, so is the GEFS, which is why we believe the models have finally corrected with the North Pacific pattern and that EPO, the horrendous bust there from the EPO. We'll talk about that in just a second. But now what the models are doing is they're still handling this very poorly. They're trying to go into the circle, reemerge into 7, and go back into 6. They're really struggling really bad. It's pretty horrible overall. But now they're at least initializing in the proper state, proper phase, we believe, because this is the current situation. And so we're realizing that our tropical forcing is not in line with that of a negative EPO. It's also very important to note that another factor we watch, our frictional torque values, are going in the opposite direction in favor for the North Pacific block to develop. This is the trend. European across the top, GFS bottom, trend of the multiple ensembles. Literally on Friday, I think it was Thursday or Friday, Brett, every single ensemble member had a negative EPO. All 100 and I think 3 of them, or how many ever there are now. Every single one was suggesting a negative EPO. But it just wasn't something we could bite on because we thought the MJO was being handled very poorly in the models. And I'm going to show you where we said that, because we did state that. Now, there's always this, meteorology is greater than modelology, and we're always just looking at the models and making forecasts. That's literally the opposite of what we do. It couldn't be further from that. But we, basically stated this. I mean, you look at this. This is where we were just a couple of days ago, forecasting a negative EPO of stronger than -3 standard deviation, and now we are in the same period forecasting a positive EPO. Not only that, we're forecasting a strongly positive EPO to develop. So the latest trends in the models have shown this significantly failed EPO, and this is where the cold was going to come from. Because one thing that I think a lot of people are not understanding is where the polar vortex is at. It's not in a favorable spot. Yeah, we've had a warming event. That's great. It's neat. It's not in a favorable spot to deliver true durable Arctic air into the U.S. So here's the Friday outlook from the EPS and the GEFS. This was the 7 to 14 day outlook across the top. This is rolled into our latest data here at the bottom. If we look at that in number-wise, we've rolled the same period from Friday to Monday. The GEFS lost 11 points, and the EPS lost almost 17 points. We had to lower our forecast by 3 points. Our outlook already looked like this on Friday. We already had this idea, so we were ahead of that based on our analysis of what was happening with the MJO and the EPO. All right. And what I mean by that, I want to show you that. This is what I want to show you. This is the basically a picture here of the stratospheric polar vortex. And yeah, we've had a warming. We've displaced it. We've shredded it. That's great. But guys, the core of this vortex, the core of the coldest air on the planet, is literally over China. I mean, it's on the other side of the hemisphere. So the EPO, had that block developed in the North Pacific, that would have allowed for the models to develop somewhat of a cross-polar flow, and it would have gotten cold for all of us. But the tropical state that we're in the MJO does not support that block to develop. So this is going to stay bottled up on the other side of the hemisphere. It's not there for us to tap into. If this was here, it would be a totally different ballgame with the negative NAO and the PV right over the Hudson Bay. It would be game on. We would be in business for tons of snow and very cold temperatures. But that's not the case. And I think a lot of people think just because we had a sudden stratospheric warming event that we're just supposed to get cold. And we're not, and we won't. Look at this since January 1, the multiple failed attempts. This is the gas-weighted heating degree days, the national forecast. You can see the model runs. This is the EPS, just cold, cold. You know, and as it gets closer, it just gets warmer and warmer. You know, it's unbelievable. Same thing here. I mean, you see all these cold runs in here, and then as we get closer and closer and closer, next thing you know, this black line is just almost nearly. I would imagine by the end of today or tomorrow, we probably won't have a forecast anywhere near the 10-year normal. It's probably going to be quite a bit below it in terms of HDDs. The GEFS has done the same thing. It's been horrible. Incredibly, just has this major cold bias. All these runs taking it above the 10-year normal only to verify below it. You look all the way back out to the first of the month. I mean, we've only been above 10-year normals in January, arguably 3 days out of the entire month for HDDs. I mean, so again, the December-January period is shaping up to be the seventh warmest since 1953. This was our outlook from Friday. This was Brett's forecast from Friday. You can see what we had on the week 2 map, and you can see right here, very bottom, okay, talking about the MJO, specifically mentioning the risks to the forecast. You know, so it's very important that you do have somebody or someone that is willing to go against the run-to-run models and these. Oh my gosh, it got so cold. Now we have to do this. We have to change it. It's going to get cold. Arctic air is coming in. That's not the case, and it is something you can see and get out ahead of because it's, you know, we do it. All right. So taking a look here. Let's get off the drawing screen here. Let's go back. Taking a look at this note slide real quick, the late January and February pattern progression based on the MJO and the failed attempts of it, if you will. We're using the CFS V2 because it's the only model really that has handled the progression that's moving the MJO. So this note slide here is basically showing you what that's going to look like because we do believe we're currently in phase 4, and the models look exactly like it. I mean, you can't argue it. Phase 4. And here's the GFS model, okay? And that is I believe that is the 6 to 10 day period. And then phase 5 here takes us into the 10 to 15. All right, see the cold seeping into the north. And then we get pretty warm probably into phase 6 of the MJO. The CFS seeing that very well. February, MJO, phase 6 during the La Nina. And then we see the intrusion of possibly some colder risks, maybe the second half of February if the MJO can get into those colder phases, but we're getting out there. Regardless, the south, the east, probably going to remain warm, and there's probably going to be southeast ridge issues despite the negative NAO. Okay? If you take some of our stronger January positive SOIs and you correlate them to the February 500 millibar pattern, this is the correlation, and right now we're on a 6-day stretch, I think, of a 20-plus SOI, which is a strong signal for La Nina, but it's a southeast ridge. All right, that's our February forecast right there. So, if anything, this probably needs adjusted. We haven't changed this since the 7th of January, but we're probably going to have to expand the much aboves. Texas is going to have to be in it, and it's possible we may just do this, and we may just have all the southeast much above normal. That's not out of the question. Maybe the cold can seep a little bit further into the plains, but it's also possible that 745 is generous, and it might need to be closer to 730 for the HDEs. We'll keep you posted. If anything, if there's a cold risk worth watching, it's the second half of February, but at this point, that's probably somewhat laughable. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.